What is it, Precious? What is it?
My name is Bilbo Baggins.
Bagginses. What is a Bagginses, Precious?
I'm a hobbit from the Shire.
Oh, we like goblinses, batses and fishes, but we hasn't tried hobbitses before. Is it soft? Is it juicy?
Now, keep your distance. I'll use this if I have to. I don't want any trouble, you understand? Just show me the way to get out of here, and I'll be on my way.
Why? Is it lost?
Yes, and I want to get unlost as soon as possible.
Oh, we know safe paths for hobbitses. Safe paths in the dark. Shut up!
I didn't say anything.
I wasn't talking to you.
Clearly a clip from The Hobbit. I'm delighted to say we've been joined by Peter Jackson. It's The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey. Peter, hello, good afternoon, sir.
How are you?
We're doing very well, and how are you? And how I just wonder what it's like having worked with this project now for so long. It's being unveiled, it's being unleashed. Is there any part of you that's nervous and tense and stressed?
Yeah, I'm a little bit of everything at the moment. You know, you obviously feel nervous because you are making the film for an audience. You're in the entertainment business, and so you want people to be able to go to the movies and think that they've been given a film that they're enjoying. So that's nervous. I'm relieved, obviously, because you also spend 2 or 3 years on a film like this, and for most of that time you're keeping the world away in a way because you don't want to spoil the movie. Yes. You want to be able to make it in relative secrecy to some degree, and so there's that moment in time where suddenly you have to hand it over to, in 25,000 cinemas around the world. Yeah.
So to begin at the beginning, just explain for the uninitiated where The Hobbit fits in with the world that we know and we understand with Lord of the Rings.
Sure. Well, Tolkien wrote The Hobbit first. He wrote The Hobbit in 1937, and it was published as pretty much a children's book. It was written almost like a bedtime story for his own children, and then it was very successful. And the publisher said to him that they'd love it to have a second Hobbit story, a sequel. So Tolkien started to write it in 1938, I guess. But then World War II came along, and it took him another 17 or 18 years before he published the sequel, which was The Lord of the Rings. And in that time period, it had grown into something very, very different to The Hobbit. It had grown into a sort of a apocalyptic epic, very much for adults. And so The Hobbit has a slightly different tone. It's a lighter tone, and it's a different story. It's not the same plot. It's not Lord of the Rings Part 4, or even really a prequel to some degree. It is very much a standalone story, although elements of it are picked up for the Lord of the Rings story later on.
And when did you realise, or when did you instinctively know this had to be 3 films and not 2?
About 6 months ago, where we were talking about we'd done with most of the shooting, and we were talking about the things that we hadn't been able to shoot, things that we would have loved to have included in the story, because there's a lot of additional Tolkien material that we're adapting, as well as just the actual novel of The Hobbit itself. There's a material that he published and the appendices of The Return of the King, about 100 pages of notes of things that were happening in Middle-earth around the time of The Hobbit, and some of it does relate more directly to the Lord of the Rings events. And so we talked about the material we can't fit into the 2 films, and then we thought, well, you know what, we could talk to the studio, we could look at expanding it, doing some more shooting next year. We've got to shoot another 10 or 12 weeks to shoot this new material, but it was our last chance, because we thought we're never going to come back to Middle-earth again as filmmakers. So if we don't put our hands up now, it's the last chance that we've got.
And you mentioned the lighter comic feel, and I think it's if people are expecting more Lord of the Rings, I mean, obviously, clearly they do get a bit of that, and there's lots because of the story and a lot of the characters. But there are fart jokes, and some of the characters. Barry Humphries does a great one-liner when he's doing his motion capture stuff. There is that lighter feel to it all the way through.
Well, yeah, it was interesting to balance that tone, because we had already shot The Lord of the Rings. So in other words, we'd shot the second book first, done it the wrong way around in theory, but I think it's actually the right way around in terms of the tone, because one day these 6 movies will exist on people's shelves as a box set, in the future, and that's really how they're going to live, for ever more in the future. The actual order that we shot them in will cease to become important, and so I wanted them to. I wanted to have a foot in both camps. Really, I wanted to be able to honour the slightly more fairy tale and humorous tone of The Hobbit, but at the same time I wanted it to belong to the world of the Lord of the Rings films that we had already made. So it was, the tone is an interesting type rope walk really between the two.
Martin Freeman's very familiar to TV viewers around the world, but particularly in the UK, where he's been in many programmes. Why was it that you wanted him more than anyone else? I mean, you really waited a long time to get him for Bilbo Baggins. Explain what you wanted from Martin Freeman.
We wanted an actor to play Bilbo who had dramatic skill, obviously, but it was also essential that this actor had great comic instincts. And the character of Bilbo is that Tolkien was writing a very fussy, slightly repressed character, and we just had this feeling that Martin can play those sorts of characters very, very well. He can do great drama and emotional parts of the performance, but also there's that comedy. It's not really that Bilbo is trying to be funny. He's not trying to make the dwarves laugh, but we laugh at Bilbo's discomfort at finding himself on this dangerous adventure that he doesn't want to even be on, in situations that are making him very nervous, surrounded by uncouth dwarves who he doesn't particularly respect. And so that's Martin can play that type of comedy incredibly well.
But you didn't just want him. You really wanted him. I mean,
there
was kind of no one else, it seems.
No, there wasn't. We had a situation that was very desperate for us, because we had wanted Martin, and yet the film took a while to get financed, because one of the studios involved, MGM, was having financial issues for 2 or 3 years during the process of this film coming together, and so we had to wait, and we couldn't actually offer Martin the role. We couldn't, because we didn't even know that if the film was actually happening. So once we had a green light and we could offer him the role, he was then at that point he had got committed on to the Sherlock TV series, and the second series of Sherlock was due to shoot, which he was contracted for right in the middle of the Hobbit filming. So there was no way that he could do both, and he was already committed to Sherlock. So we were in a very desperate state, and we didn't really have a second choice. And we did think about other actors, because that would have been a solution, but I knew instinctively that the film would be nowhere near as good without Martin. So we did something very unusual, which was we started to shoot the Hobbit. I mean, we said to Martin, if we could make it work, if you could go back and do Sherlock in the middle of the Hobbit, would that be okay? And he said, sure, yeah, he'd love to do that. So we actually shot for 3 or 4 months, and then we stopped filming, and we shut the whole production down. Everybody got sent home. We shut it down for about 2 months while Martin was able to come back from New Zealand to the UK, do Sherlock, and then he rejoined us again, and we started up filming again.
Andy Serkis has been on the show many times, and I wonder. And obviously, it's a spectacular film, and there are many huge set pieces which people will remember. But for me, the heart of the film is the scene which Martin Freeman and Andy Serkis do, which is this this ultimate game of riddles. Is that
yes?
Would that be right? Do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably the most iconic scene in the Hobbit book, and particularly so because it's the scene which does. It is the foundation of the Lord of the Rings. I mean, it literally is the moment that Bilbo Baggins finds this gold ring on the ground in this cave, and Gollum has mislaid it, and obviously that has major ramifications for what happens further on in the story. It's not a significant. The ring does not play a significant part in the Hobbit. It's almost a secondary part of the story, but it does establish that continuation.
And I saw it in 3D, and I saw it in 48 frames per second. Can you describe for a radio audience clearly what people are seeing, which will be different to what they saw with Lord of the Rings?
Well, it's going to be different to what you have seen in any film, because since 1927, all cinema movies have been, shot and projected at 24 frames a second, 24 individual pictures a second, which are often, and it's a very slow speed. It seems like a lot, but each frame is blurry. It's not that sharp. And put together, it has what they call strobing, which is like the judder between frames, especially if the camera's moving or panning fast, and our brain kind of works at resolving it. That our brain tricks us into thinking that we're seeing fluid and sharp pictures, but if you double that, if you actually shoot and project 48 frames, and you double the amount of information that's being that your brain is processing, it actually makes the experience feel much more real. It feels, the best way I can describe it is that somebody takes the screen away from the cinema, and you're looking out a hole in the back of the cinema into the real world. It suddenly doesn't feel like a film anymore. It feels like it's got an immersive reality to it, which is pretty compelling.
Will you make all your films this way in the future? I mean, there's I don't get the motion sickness. I haven't met anyone who actually felt. I wonder if this story has become slightly overblown. That actually no one in the cinema that I was in felt sick at all.
No, thousands of people have seen The Hobbit now at the premieres and things, and no one's felt sick. No, that was a little bit of nonsense, that story. But of course, in the internet day and age, someone could make up a story like that, and it does tend to travel, unfortunately. But that's the relief that I'm going to have when people can actually get to see the film for themselves, because those sorts of stories will die a natural death because the film will be there for people to make up their own minds with.
Some listeners' questions, Peter. Mark Harrison asks, he says, after making the massive Spider-Man trilogy, Sam Raimi went back to his roots by directing a gross-out horror with Drag Me to Hell. Would you ever be enticed to make another film in the vein of Brain Dead or Bad Taste in between these movies?
Yeah, well, I mean, all three Hobbit movies have been shot, so there is really effectively no in between. But certainly once the third Hobbit movie has been released and we've finished it, I don't know what I'm going to do next, but the idea of doing a low budget horror movie is very appealing to me. Yeah.
Brian Ross says, it looks as though only 2 UK cinemas are showing The Hobbit in HFR IMAX 3D. Multiplexes with IMAX or IMAX Lite are offering a choice of IMAX 3D or HFR 3D or Vanilla 2D, bear with me, on the non-IMAX screens. How do we choose, especially if we don't want to or can't travel to those two cinemas? A complex question.
A complex question, and if you can't travel there or you don't want to travel there, then probably the choice is a little less, isn't it? A very complicated question. I mean, look, I think you should just see it in whatever you're comfortable with. If you prefer to see the movie in exactly the same way as any other film looks, then you should just go to either a 2D or 3D 24 frame a second theatre. If you're interested in seeing what 48 looks like and seeing something that's a bit more immersive, a bit more real, then seek out a 48 frame HFR, which is called the high frame rate. It's called cinemas. IMAX is terrific, but I know there's not that many IMAX screens in the UK, but that's a good way to see it too.
Just on the issue of that word immersive, do you think anyone sat through the Lord of the Rings trilogy and thought, I wish they'd been in 3D?
No, I don't think so. I mean, they preceded the new wave of 3D for sure. But I also think that since the Lord of the Rings, we've had a real increase in choices of how we see films. Even in the last 10 years, people have got plasma TVs, high definition TVs. They've got iPads, iPhones, and I hate the idea that I'm a director making a film for an iPad. I mean, I want people to come to the cinema, and I think it's very important. We have a responsibility as filmmakers to keep increasing that the power of that theatrical experience, of the experience in a cinema, because that's how people should see these films, and we can't let the old technology just sit there and become stagnant while all these new options are available to us for how we see our films.
And are you still on board to direct the next Tintin film?
Yeah, that's where we're working on the screenplay at the moment, and Anthony Horowitz is writing the script of that right now. I'm actually going to meet with him in a few days to do some work on it, and that we hopefully be doing the motion capture for that next year. Yeah.
Peter, a pleasure to have you on the programme, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.